are listening to the Moody Girl podcast with me, Emily Fazer. Throughout this series, we're going to be opening the minds of experts and delving into the world of alternative healing methods. Great. So hi, Lucie. Thank you so much for taking the time. I know you've got a million patients, 2 children, a new puppy. So thank you for taking time out of your day to have a conversation with me.
It's a pleasure. It's a topic that I really love talking about. So always happy to have a chat about it.
Amazing. So the Moody Girl podcast, we're going to be looking into different methods and practices of holistic healing. So I thought for the first episode, what better way of introducing the Moody Girl podcast with you as my first guest. I discovered you in 2020, just kind of during the height of the pandemic on Instagram. I was suffering with my own kind of skin problems. And for anyone listening, I have an autoimmune condition called psoriasis, which is a bit similar to eczema, but I mainly have it around my elbows. When we first spoke, I had it flaring up on my face. So I was kind of in a bit of a crisis point, and you really helped me transition out of that. And in my day-to-day life now, herbs are so important. So I mean, I have tinctures that you prescribe me every month. So I'll have one in the morning, one in the evening, and then I'll also take my big flask of tea around with me everywhere I go. Everyone just knows me for the flask. They're like, "Are you a witch? What are you doing? What is that?" And I'm like, "Oh, it's my medical herbalist. She prescribed me it," and everyone thinks I'm batshit. So I thought, let's start with you explaining what is a medical herbalist.
Okay, so a medical herbalist. So what I'm going to do actually, first of all, is that as it stands in the UK, anybody could call themselves a herbalist. So we have no statutory regulation in the UK at the moment. So anybody could technically call themselves a herbalist, but in order to differentiate a medical herbalist, is somebody who's done training to a degree level. So a medical herbalist is somebody who has a professional level of training. So those people normally have done a degree course or a diploma course that has certain prerequisites around it that you have to fulfill in order to qualify. We also do clinical training inside of our degree course. And that clinical training normally requires you to do more than 600 hours of clinical training prior to qualification.
Amazing.
So we also have to sit clinical exams in order to qualify as a herbalist. So we have to sit normal board level exams that anybody who's doing a degree would need to do. But then on top of that, we also have clinical training exams that we have to pass, which are very similar to clinical exams that anybody going through a medical training has to do. So that involves like clinical examination and differential diagnosis and being evaluated in front of a board as to your practical knowledge and practical skills in terms of carrying out examinations.
Wow. And how long is that course usually?
The course that I did was 4 years because I trained in Scotland.
Yeah.
So, but in England, you can do a 3-year degree course, and then you can also do a distance learning course as well. But typically, the minimum that you have to do is 3 years.
Yeah. Okay. So it's a full-on course. You can't just go to Holland and Barrett and just start prescribing people stuff out there.
It is a really, really full-on course. And
yeah, it sounds it.
What often happens as well is that, I went into it thinking, I already had a degree. I'd already been to university and had a degree and thought, it can't be that hard. And it was super, 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 super hard because not only are you going through a very rigorous training, what also happens typically is that you start to do a lot of your own healing as well. So you start to go on your own kind of journey or another level of your own journey because you might already be on that path already. So you're kind of simultaneously processing a lot of your own stuff and training to be a herbalist. So someone in my school had said that training to be a medical herbalist at a particular school that we studied at was like warrior training. It really was. It really, really
That's
pushed you
amazing.
extremely hard.
Yeah, of course. And in terms of, how you got into it, you said that you've done another degree. How did it kind of happen that you not fell into it, but followed that sort of path?
I did literally fall into it. You're right.
Really?
Yeah, yeah. Well, it started because of my own healing journey, and I think that a lot of people who work in the field of healing or health come from a background of personal experience,
Yeah.
and that going through that personal process then drives you into something else. And I had long-standing systemic health problems since being about 16. And
Wow.
when I was at university at 19, I'd kept going back to the doctor time and time again, and it was, I don't know what it was, but there was one particular day that I just realized that it wasn't good enough. What they were giving me, it wasn't
Yeah.
good enough. I wasn't satisfied.
Yeah.
And had this notion that there was something more than the symptoms driving the problem, that there was maybe a root cause or a deeper cause.
Absolutely.
And so I just kind of, I can still see myself at 19 stood outside the doctor's surgery holding a prescription, just saying like, I'm done. I'm
Yeah, at
done.
19,
with
that's like a
this.
really bold move. And like, I feel like we're so conditioned into go to the GP. What they say is gospel. When you leave the GP, you're going to have an answer. But for me, it was going in there, not having an answer, feeling frustrated, going home, feeling isolated, not knowing where to turn. And it was only through Instagram that I've been able to kind of open my mind to other methods. And that's how I found you. But I mean, to kind of feel like that at 19, I think that's quite something. And then, so what did you decide from there?
Yeah, and I still to this day don't know why I had that notion of something else, because I'm not from a family who knew anything about alternative medicine or anything other than the mainstream paradigm. But I feel incredibly lucky that something in me, just had that thought, and it really opened my mind. So it started with seeing a massage therapist. I think that I probably just was like alternative healing or alternative methods, and I found massage, and that really appealed to me. So I started going for regular massage with this woman who I thought was really amazing, and she knew so much about the alternative. She used essential oils, and she opened my eyes to the possibility of something else. And through aromatherapy and body work, I became aware that there was also plant medicines as well. And I also was quite lucky, like a series of events. I had split up with a long-term boyfriend, and in that summer that relationship broke down, the previous year my sister had been and worked on an organic farm in California.
Wow.
And as I was in like quite a state of distress after this long-term relationship breaking down, my mum and my sister had said, why don't you go out to California for the summer and just go and be in the sunshine and work on this farm, and it's really cool, and
Sounds
just
amazing.
kind of groovy people.
Yeah.
And I why not? And when I went and worked on this farm, it was really, really eye-opening, because California obviously is so much further ahead in terms of the alternative scene than anything that I'd been exposed to in the UK. And foods, the people who owned the farm, really knew how to look after themselves. They really had sovereignty over their health. Of course, in America, because they've got a private healthcare system, like
Yeah.
if you want treatment, you have to pay for it. So it then creates a counterculture of
Yeah.
people wanting to take control of their health.
Yeah.
And so the people who ran the farm, Todd and Oasis, they were just like so inspiring. They were really into homeopathy and food as medicine, and I learned so much from them. Like they, you know, everything that came up, they were like, oh, you know, you should eat this and you should do that and this will help. And they introduced me to things like fasting and colonic irrigation and all kinds of, like, the full spectrum of healing. And the other thing that happened was that they did farmers markets on a weekly basis. So a lot of their produce, they then sold through farmers markets. And going to the farmers markets, like I worked at the farmers markets and just met so many interesting people. And it was like,
I feel like we don't have that culture here at all. You know, in Europe, they've got farmers markets, in California, definitely. But I feel like that's something that's so lacking here. You know, I'd love to just on the weekend go down the farmers market and chat with people about, you know, homegrown vegetables and have similar kind of mindsets, but just doesn't happen here. Everyone's rushing to get to Tesco's, shoving it in the back of their car, rushing home. And it's just, I don't know, it's just a completely different process.
yeah, totally, of course. And there's something about that, the social aspect of that there too, isn't it? That, like you said, you know,
Yeah.
like on continental Europe, the farmers market is not just a place where you buy products, it's also a place where you connect with people.
Yeah.
And that's like a really fundamental thing in terms of being a human being. Like our British
Absolutely.
culture is weather. I mean, the weather doesn't help either,
I
right?
think
In
so.
Britain.
Yeah, exactly. In the
But
winter, everyone's trying to get home fast.
yeah, for sure. So that really opened me up to different stuff. And then when I came back, I was in my final year of university then, and food became something that was really important. I'd started looking at ways in which I could improve my health through diets. Like I've literally tried every kind of antifungal, anti-candida diet on the, you know, really intense,
Wow.
ridiculous diet to try, you know, like most people do when you're in a time of crisis, you really will look for
Totally.
anything that will help.
Yeah.
And so food became really important. And then as food, you know, food and diet were really fundamental parts of my health. Herbs then kind of, it was like it just naturally followed on from there. And I bought a book. I brought Andrew Chevalier's Encyclopedia of Herbal Medicine, a big hardback book. And I literally just opened it, looked up what was going on. And then I was living in Leeds at the time, and there was a Neal's Yard Remedies in Leeds, and they have an apothecary that you
I've
can
been
go
to
and buy
that.
herbs from.
I love that shop. It's great.
Yeah. So that was really like my first introduction into buying herbs. And I just literally bought myself a load of herbs and just started giving them to myself and
Wow.
seeing what that did and how that helped. And
And
it just,
did you kind of like record that, or did you have like a chart, like this one made me feel like this, no, it was just kind of like, right, I'm just gonna go for it.
it was so it was so just like a massive experiment. It was a massive experiment. But I also, you know, really admire like my younger self that was just like, this is what I'm doing. You know,
Honestly,
I'm
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 actually like, I'm blown away at how young you were when you just had this like revelation. And at that time, I mean, was Instagram and Facebook, I mean, they haven't really been as big as they are as, you know, the past 5, 6 years. So, I mean, at that point, you just independently were just like, right, that's it. I'm going in a new direction. And I think you are kind of taking health into your own hands, and it just empowers any patient, I feel, after meeting you.
Yeah, for sure. And I'm glad that that's the case, you know, and like looking back now, you know, I'm 40 now, and looking back, I really think that it was the plants that called me. You know, it's really my life purpose to be a herbalist. You know, I'm not from that family, I'm not from that, you know, there's nothing in my immediate lineage that kind of facilitates that process. But I just really think that now it's something that is in me that I needed to do, and kind of fulfills a greater purpose. And it was actually it's no surprise to my mum and dad, because I've always just been like that I would I even in my teenage years, I remember saying to my mum, we were going to go, when it was when there was the eclipse, was it like 1998 or something, when we had the eclipse?
Yeah.
And I remember saying to my mum, we were living in Lancashire at the time, and I was saying to my mum, I said to my mum, we're going to drive to Cornwall. Me and my boyfriend, we're going to drive to Cornwall, and we're going to see that eclipse. And my mum was like, you are not going. And I was just like, I don't care. You can't stop me. I'm going. And so I've always just been like that. I've always chosen my own path, and I've always, I'm sure that's been really hard for my mum and dad at lots of points, to be taking such a strong stand out with what's relatively normal, and I'm sure that they were like, we wish you were just more normal. And I was just like, no, sorry, not doing that.
And your sister as well, is she that way inclined as well?
My sister is really interested. My sister takes like quite an integrated approach.
Okay.
In that she kind of has her foot in both camps, actually. Like she does use the doctor, but she has also, like, through her own health problems, I think the perspective that she takes is like, she recognizes that the mainstream model has its limitations, and that she's fortunate enough to have the resources to be able to stand out with that. So it's a bit of both, whereas she's like, modern medicine has its massive benefits, and she's willing to engage in those in certain services, but in other, like with her personal health, she's very much stepped out of the mainstream services and gone to like functional doctors who do more rigorous testing and integrate things like supplements and diet. And she's also very into psychology as well, like, the role of the mind in terms of our physical health too. So she's done quite a lot of psychotherapeutic work in terms of like her own emotional health and emotional well-being. So she's a bit of both. I think in my family, I'm very much like, Lucie really is the weird, wacky one who's gonna just,
But they
they
must find it fascinating though. Like if any of your family have any health issues, do they come to you and talk to you about it, or do they, your parents, for instance, do they go down the generic GP route?
It's interesting because my mum, both my parents have had their own kind of health issues going on. My mum is very skeptical of the doctors, very skeptical of the doctors. I was training to be a herbalist. She'd had really, really bad menstrual bleeding, horrendous menstrual bleeding. And I said to her, I think you've got fibroids. And the doctor had basically just been palming her off all the time, like, oh, it's just your age and stage of life. And I'd said to her, you need to push a little bit harder with your doctor, and you actually, like, this bleeding is actually completely abnormal and unacceptable. And encouraged her to go and have further investigations. And when she pushed it a little bit harder with the GP, they said, oh, you've got loads of fibroids. We're going to have to do a hysterectomy really quickly.
What?
And it was that was like, oh. So my mum has quite a big distrust of the medical system.
Yeah.
She will go to them, but she's also, my mum very much takes her own health into her own hands. So she uses a lot of supplements. She takes a lot of herbal powders. Exercise. She does yoga. She tries and takes as best care of herself as possible. So she's kind of got that approach. And I think that, like most women in a relationship, she is kind of like helps my dad in terms of his health too. And
Yeah.
my dad, quite a few years ago, my dad was diagnosed with type 2 diabetes.
Wow.
And my mum was really against him going on medication because she was aware that that medication had side effects. And she took that balanced view of like, there are benefits, but there are also risks, and we do need to consider the risks. Like, that's how you make an informed choice, that you do a risk benefit analysis. And she's well read, you know, she does her own research. She's the first person on the internet using Dr. Google. And she had said to my dad, my dad's a dentist, right?
Wow.
So my dad is very like mainstream, very traditional, and also very authoritarian as well, that it kind of feeds into that doctor as the authority role.
Yeah.
But my mum had said to him, I think that we can sort this out. So my dad lost 4 stone in weight. She really supported him and encouraged him to lose weight, and also gave him herbal stuff as well, and supplements like essential fatty acids and lots of other things. And actually now he doesn't medically qualify as being diagnosed with type 2 diabetes.
That's incredible. I mean, it just goes to show that even though you may be the wacky one in your family, your mum's that way inclined in her own way. And the fact that, you know, through the kind of mistrust of going to the GP and not having those fibroids diagnosed, then she's kind of gone out and looked for alternative methods, and that's rubbed off. And I feel like the predominant amount of my friends at the moment are kind of in that, well, as you get older, you start to get more health conditions. You know, I felt like through your 20s, you just drink, don't think about anything, eat what you want. And then as soon as 30 hits, it's like, oh crap, actually, I've got an autoimmune condition. My hormones are crazy. I mean, my hormones have always been crazy, but, you know, it really starts to add like a layered, you know, health issues. And I mean, something that I was kind of conditioned from a young age from my mum was always, when we go to the GP, make sure that when we go in there, you really over egg it. So even if it's not that bad, you say it's really bad, because otherwise they'll palm us off. And that was just, and if I was ever going to have a GP appointment, it would always be an emergency one. And everyone would say, oh, you know, I've got to wait till next Wednesday for a GP appointment. I said, why do you do that? Say it's an emergency every time. But that's just because I was so used to my mum going in there with a list of things that she needed to talk about, no one listening to her, everyone saying you're a hypochondriac, and that then kind of coming down to me and not having anyone to talk to about it. So it's just everywhere I kind of go, everyone's got their own story about, you know, oh, I've been trying to help my mum who's, you know, going through this, or trying to help my auntie who's going through that, and they can't get an appointment, and it's just frustration. I think it's leading in a lot of, hopefully, you know, we will start mirroring California in the way that we are more open-minded, and everyone knows about Medical Herbalist, and everyone should be taking daily herbs, you know.
Yeah. And I think that COVID has been really, you know, the pandemic has been very catalytic in terms of helping people to see that actually their health is in their own hands, and that loads more people are kind of waking up to, you know, the poor services that are provided by the doctor, be that like either not getting what you want, or not having those extra questions, and or also just like the amount of shit that goes down in the NHS, you know, like maternity services is one to look at, you know, like the kind of shit that they pull on women. Like, I think that women now, not just actually pandemic, you know, it was like Me Too, Black Lives Matter, pandemic, you know, those 3 really big events in history have finally allowed people, especially women, to start saying no, like,
not right,
this isn't sorry, just saying like, yeah, this isn't okay, and this is a service. And what I hear a lot of people saying is that if only the doctor would say, I'm so sorry, we can't help you.
Yeah,
And that's it, like recognizing their limits. And I think that the time, we're now coming to an end of an era where doctors are the all-seeing and the all-knowing in terms of our health, because I think that a lot of people are having the confidence to say, like, this isn't satisfactory or this isn't enough, you know, and the health services. But it would be great if doctors, more doctors, because of course there are some doctors who are incredible doctors, you know,
you just got to find the right one.
And also having doctors who will say, you know, why don't you try something else? Like, I can't help you within what I can do. I can't help you, but what about if you tried X, Y, and Z? Like, I've got a family of patients who live over on the East Coast, and they have this amazing doctor who is super open to herbal medicine and super open to supplements, and will regularly, I've had conversations with her about how to treat the patient, you know, because her priority is the well-being of the patient. So her ego is not in the game.
That's what it should be, though. Why is this ego come in the door and sit down at the doctor's table? Why should that be the prominent thing? And it goes so much further than that. And being a doctor surely should be about doing the best thing for the patient who's suffering.
Yeah. And often, you know, like, I quite often write letters to consultants, because quite a lot of my patients are under consultant care, and communicating with consultants is really different. Like, they're very open, and some of the consultants that I've had conversations with, you know, even they take what they would call a holistic approach too, you know, that they take into consideration social factors, family circumstances, diet, all of these things. And they're recommending, you know, taking certain dietary approaches, trying to support people emotionally if they've got a lot of stress going on a family level, and that they know that that kind of care is really what's going to benefit the patient. But there's a lot of really wild stuff going on.
And it just feels as though, you know, just taking a pill is never ever, you know, obviously in extreme situations where you know you really do need to take those, then obviously I'm going to advocate that for the right condition. But personally, for me, it just hasn't seemed like the right thing to do. And I think for a lot of people, it's not the right thing to do, but it's the only kind of way that we can go.
Yeah, it's interesting because, like, something that I often think about, like, one of the reasons that I became a herbalist was because I realized how poorly equipped we were to take care of our families, you know. So, like, in my 20s, I was thinking, so I was 24 when I started to train to be a herbalist. And I was thinking, you know, if I have a family of my own, and in terms of my existing family, like, I felt so helpless. Like, what can I do to help them? Like, what have we got? What tools and resources have we got on hand? You know, besides diet, like, what tools and resources have we got on hand to help? And I just had this overwhelming urge to feel well resourced. And, like, one of the things I think that needs to happen is that we just need to have, like, a paradigm shift in terms of, like, how children are raised. So, like, you know, when you're going through school, you know, like, even at primary level, like, teaching children about their emotional selves and their emotional well-being. And, like, you know, my eldest child is 8, and she's aware of things like mental health, and that our whole selves is important. And also that, like, mothers, you know, they don't know how to use, like, home remedies. So they're not, even when you've got kids, you know, if they've got a cold or whatever, they might just go to the pharmacy and pick something up from there rather than looking at something natural. And that's, like, something that's really, really, really important to me now, is, like, that we're making generational differences. So my kids, obviously I'm a herbalist, so they've, you know, I don't take them to the doctor. They don't need to go, because I treat them and look after them myself. They've never had anything really, really serious going on.
So that have they ever been to a GP before, your children? Have you
My eldest daughter has been to the GP once for a
Yeah.
positive diagnosis of chickenpox.
Wow. And that's 8 years. I mean, I can remember
In
from
8 years.
up to 8 being kind of carted off to the GP countless times, you know. And that was
Yeah.
just from, mum trying to protect her children and make sure she's doing the right thing. At that point, medical herbalists were probably just didn't have a clue, you know. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, so that's amazing though. How does she feel about, the work that you do?
Yeah, she's I did a little video with her recently actually. It's on my Instagram grid because I'd asked her. She's obviously grown up seeing me be a herbalist. We've always had the apothecary at home. She's given herbs. Herbs is really normal for her. Her dad's very much engaged in herbal medicine as well, so that's really normal for him and his family.
That's lovely.
And but so I wanted to ask her because actually she didn't know what a doctor was till she was about 3.
Wow.
So I had to tell her what a doctor was. And yeah, I did this little interview with her recently about what she thought about me being a herbalist and what she thought about medicine. And most of her friends know that I'm a herbalist. So like at school, when I go to pick her up, recently one of them came up to me and said, like, are you a doctor? And I was like, not really, no, not a doctor, but I work with people around their health and I use plant-based medicines. And they obviously talk about it. Imani's well versed in it and talks about it at school and with her
Wow.
friends. And
How cool is that though, that she's able to spread that knowledge in the playground? Like that is just
yeah,
so
absolutely.
cool.
Yeah, and even like there's other things too, like so she's seen having her younger sister's 7 years younger than her, so that's a big gap that she has a different perspective. So she's seen me giving herbs to the baby, so
Mm.
she knows that it's just very normal for her to be using herbs. Like it's just that's what's normal for her. And even things like, so my youngest daughter was born at home,
Wow.
and that was something that was really important to me because I want it to be normal in Imani's mind that babies are born at home,
Mm.
and that women's bodies are designed for birth and that you can birth out with the current medical system, that's not something. And I'm not saying that I had a home birth just for that reason. There was
No,
lots of
no, of
other
course. Yeah.
reasons, but that is something, because Imani now says to her school friends. They had a conversation recently where they would, one of her school friends, mom's friends had had a baby, and she was saying, oh, we're going to visit the baby in hospital. And Imani had said, why is there something wrong with the baby? Is that why it's in hospital?
Oh,
And they
wow.
were like, no, the baby was born in hospital. And Imani was like, but babies are born at home.
That's
And then her
fantastic.
and her friends had this kind of disagreement because Imani was like, no, babies are born at home.
And so,
Because quite a lot of my friends have also birthed at home, and
yeah.
we often, I make a very conscious effort to make her aware, like, oh, another baby's been born at home, another. I support quite a lot of women through pregnancy and childbirth, and saying to them, we went and visited someone locally the other day to drop some herbs off, and she had an 8-day-old baby, and I said, baby born at home. That is also spreading, yeah, for sure, because that younger generation is really important. And I run last year I started teaching a herbal medicine course for parents,
Wow.
so that more people can have more agency at home in terms
Mm.
of not going to the GP.
That's amazing. I think like in terms even the home birth thing for me, I mean my mum was born through a home birth, and my grandma's still living in the house that she was born in. And so that's always kind of, but from that was, yeah, that was normal obviously back in the day, but then my mum was very much hospital, and even just you talking about it now, and even though I'm super into holistic healing and way of life, even that hasn't kind of crossed my mind yet. I'm kind of getting to the age where I'm going to start thinking about children. But yeah, that's something that's even so kind of far away from what I've even thought. I don't really know anyone who's had a baby at home apart from my grandma. So yeah, thank you for kind of highlighting that and normalizing it, because I've kind of just know that my mum's had 4 cesareans. I should probably go into the hospital because maybe I'll need a cesarean, all these like things that just, and it's crazy because no one talks about this. I really haven't ever had a conversation about home birth before. And, I knew I've got a list of questions written down, and I knew that as soon as we kind of got recording, that none of those questions were going to get spoken about, because this is what happens when we chat. We just end up kind of organically talking about everything, which is great. I mean,
But
I
I
know
guess the thing that you need to think about is like, remember where you were at, in terms of your personal health. And it was only when you started asking questions, like you realized that you thought about health in a certain way,
yeah.
and you had a lot of conditioning attached to that. And
Mm,
then when you started asking questions, you started breaking that down. And
yeah.
then of course, like systems thinking became more normal for you, and that's what actually made sense to you. So birth is the same thing, it's just that we've got a set of questions that we haven't looked at,
Mm-hmm.
and we've got conditioning attached to that
Mm-hmm.
that just needs looking at. And then once we've kind of gone through that exploratory process, we can then make a decision about it. I can unequivocally say through my experience, last year I supported 30 women through pregnancies, and I would unequivocally say that you are safer to give birth at home than in hospital. And
Wow.
all of the women who birthed in hospital had multiple complications and trauma. None
Really?
of the women who had home births had that.
Whoa. Okay. That is like honestly mind baffling to me right now. I'm just like, this is about medical herbalism now. It's gone into home birth, and that's probably something I need to look into after this. But wow, okay, that's like insane. Whilst we're kind of so back on medical herbalism, is there anything that you kind of, would like to share to the listeners who may be struggling with their health, not quite sure what to do, what direction to take? Are there any kind of herbs that you would bulk prescript to like the whole of the general public, or is it really personal? Does it always have to be, prescribed a tailored plan almost?
Yeah. First of all, what I would say is like, trust yourself.
Yeah.
Like those, we go to the doctor and we get minimized, or we just get completely fobbed off, sometimes abused
Yeah.
even.
Yeah, totally. That is the amount
But
of times I've come out of there, or my mum's come out of there, and she's actually been verbally abused and come out feeling, not swearing or anything that, but just condescending comments, putting down, what you're trying to highlight, and that's just it's a form of abuse.
totally. But what, that voice that you've got inside yourself that says like, I know something is wrong,
Yeah.
or I know that this is important. Like maybe there's something about your health or what's going on that like maybe it's food, maybe you might think like dairy products, like they definitely don't work for me. And even if you say that to the doctor and the doctor says food has nothing to do with your health, listen to yourself, because
Yeah.
like that's it. Like the patient always knows, like you always know that there's something about. And I think that if you can stay true to yourself
Yeah.
and find someone who will acknowledge that, then that is really transformational in terms of your personal health journey.
Yeah.
And I think it's really hard to say, like, is there one, is there a herb or herbs that you could have in your life? I think the thing is, like, I've very much changed my opinion over the 10 plus years that I've been a practitioner. And I think that,
Yeah.
if you start using herbs like at home, it literally doesn't matter what it is, it's that you use them, you know. And the thing is that herbs are literally like a gateway drug in terms of like, they open this portal to you, you know. So something that, you know, chamomile, you know, is like chamomile and mint are really popular herbs at home. And that even if you switch out like your tea bags for a better quality of herbs. So if you're, you know, switch from buying tea bags to buying herbs from a herbalist, for example, you know, if they've got like a range, you know, I've got like an e-commerce shop that I do a range of pre-blended herbal teas, like switch over to those and you'll start to notice that it will start to change how you feel about them. Lots of people do things like ashwagandha or milk thistle or rhodiola or ginseng or maca powder, you know, all of these, aloe vera, echinacea, all of these kind of more mainstream herbs, like whatever it is, just get into it and just trust that process and go into it more. And I think like the big difference, it's really interesting because you know, over the past few years, I mean, over the decades that I've been working, I've treated people who are really into herbs. So they've done a lot of like self-healing themselves. And then they've come to me and they couldn't believe the difference in terms of taking herbs for themselves and taking a prescription and getting that support. So seeing a medical herbalist is not just about having herbs tailored individually to you. It's also about the expertise that they bring through their clinical experience that is also really going to change your health and well-being. So I think that everybody should have herbs in their daily life. You know, we co-evolved with plants.
Yeah.
You know, we have receptor cells in our bodies for plant chemicals, and it's something that our bodies need and we should take on a daily basis. Herbs are also in food, right? So if people use herbs on a daily basis, they're just not very conscious that they're doing so. Even if that's just like oregano on your pizza, you know, they're still taking herbs.
Yeah.
And it's about like expanding that consciousness into a broader picture. But herbs are a really fundamental part of being a human being living on planet Earth.
Yeah.
And that if we can open our eyes to that and bring them in more, then that's going to change the way that we are in our health and our well-being. But prescription medicine is really different because it is really specific to you. And there's some kind of magic that exists between the patient, the practitioner and the herbs. It's like a holy trinity.
Honestly,
you know.
do you remember when I messaged you and I said, at this point when we first met, I'd done the most insane juice cleanse. I'd cut out alcohol, caffeine, dairy, meat, everything you can think of pretty much. Did a super restrictive diet during the first lockdown, and it still wasn't healing my skin. And that's when I spoke to you and you were like, yeah, you know, you're healthy, you're living a healthy lifestyle. It's not necessarily just that, it goes further than that. Anyways, you prescribed me the tinctures. I had some golden milk to take at night, supplements, also bulking agents were in loads. I was taking 8 supplements a day, all with bulking agents in. You were like, no, get rid of those. Here's actually good quality supplements. So that's also something, listeners, to remember. Look at the back of vitamins. If there's bulking agents, chuck them in the bin. There's no point in having them. And look at kind of Lucie's recommended Cyto plan for me. But yeah, it was as though I felt for the first time ever like I was healing from the inside out. And I can't tell you how that feels, but it was just, I just knew instinctively, my body knew that I was healing, and I've never felt something like that before. And that's why I'm just such a huge advocate of it. And I don't even drink normal tea now. I always have your herbal tea. I can't go without it. And I just think it needs to be more mainstream, especially in the UK. So thank you so much for helping me on my personal journey and for taking the time to tell your story today.
I'm so happy, you know, and something that's really important to me is that I really want herbal medicine to be normal, you know, which is why I'm really passionate about using social platforms
Yeah.
for getting that message out there. And I do a lot of work, you know, it could be a full-time job for me, the marketing that I do around
I
herbal
bet.
medicine. It's not just about me wanting popularity, it's
Mm.
about me wanting more people to have really good quality information from a professional person that's reliable and trustworthy and clinically experienced. So that platform has become really important, because something that I hear all the time is like, you know, I'm so happy that you're here on social media, because
Mm.
the information that you share is really helping me, and it's helped to change my health. And that's it. Like, the more that we can normalize it, and also get, you know, I'm a professional person, I'm not, and I really want herbal medicine to be respected in that way, that it's
Yeah.
efficacious, it's thought through, you know, the practitioners are really, really fantastically trained people, and that
Yeah.
they should be respected as really amazing practitioners. So, you know, on behalf of all of herbal medicine, you know, I just want, yeah, I appreciate you doing this to get that word out there to more people.
No, it's been totally life changing, just kind of starting this path with you. So hopefully anyone who's listening will start that journey too.
Great, wonderful. Thank you so much for
No,
today. I really enjoyed the time talking to you.
no worries. Thanks so much, Lucy. Take care.
Okay, Emily, thank you.
Bye.
Bye.